Hi, Bonnie. How you going?
Good.
We heard that you were in Australia for a little bit, so we thought we'd catch up some time with you and have a chat to you about your adventures in roller derby. So you made a comment about turnover and high turnover in clubs, and that's part of the reason, that people might not be so welcoming. And high turnover is definitely something that I've experienced, and I think anyone in this sport has experienced, and is closely linked to, I guess, recruitment and retention. So what are some of the things that you've learned along the way about potentially some good strategies for recruiting and then retaining people that come along?
I feel like if you have something shiny, people want to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like just like really keeping people inspired within,
Mm-hmm.
that recruits more than anything else. Having really exciting games,
Mm-hmm.
like having a team of people that's inspired to play. These things aren't necessarily easy to pull off, but if you can pull that off, and just keep everybody really focused, have your leaders study the art of leadership so that the team feels secure
Mm-hmm.
and inspired and focused. That does tend to make your team more shiny, make your games more fun to watch, and that's what brings in the recruitment, I think, to a certain extent. I think, in the old days, we would just take flyers to bars, and I don't necessarily think that doesn't work, but I feel like just being really shiny, like every single person will bring their idea to the table on how to bring other people in. And that's also the secret to retaining people is, in San Diego, we had a rule that like once you had been in the league for 5 years, you were considered an OG and you didn't have to pay dues anymore. And then so many people got to OG status that we had to be like, okay, no more OGs. Like, we need some people to pay dues.
Yeah.
But you'd be surprised how many people stuck around for OG status, like a little incentive goes a long way. So I think every league will have to come to a decision on what that means to them. But I feel like everything starts with leadership, really.
Yeah.
Leaders who are inspired, who keep themselves motivated and keep the team focused and motivated, attracts sort of everything else. And the challenge that I found was that not everyone is necessarily into personal growth just because they signed up for a leadership position. But if you can make people aware of the necessity of that, of constant evolution. I mean, I use the word evolution in probably every single league meeting, like we must evolve. And so that was just sort of like embedded in the ethos of everything that we did. And I feel like that was also helpful. It helped people deal with the challenges that come because there are constantly changes based on inside and outside circumstances that you don't foresee. 3 jammers leave at once, and you have to adapt to that. And if you have been hearing the word evolve the whole time, it helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
It helps, but it's always a challenge, But just being shiny in general, just helping everybody understand the importance of shining and being their absolute best. That's really what takes care of that stuff, I think.
And you and I have talked over the years about like things like attendance policies, and that's kind of like a punitive measure of getting people to come as opposed to inspiring people to be there and providing an incentive for them to be there rather than a punishment for not being there.
Right.
And you've been a coach and a captain. So can you think about some of the things as a coach that you would use to incentivize people to be there and inspire them to be at sessions?
Well, I've been successful with this with some groups of people and unsuccessful with others. So I'm not going to say that I have the magic bullet for that. I know that in the early days it was very easy for me, and maybe it was because it was new to me and I wasn't tired yet. But in the early days it was very easy to keep people motivated and inspired just by meeting regularly and talking to them about a vision of greatness. And the main goal was always greatness, which is a goal that it's never really over. And so it gives you something constant to strive for. And when you talk about the greatness that you see in people already, and you're able to point out individual characteristics that people have and say, like, look, this is the beginning of something great. And this team can do great things. And here's, you know, and it applies differently to every single league, obviously, but a vision of greatness and striving for it and really believing that that's a possibility for you is one of the most inspiring things, I think. Like, that's what I look for. And that's what keeps me inspired, is when I have like an ideal to strive for. Also, just the routine of things. I think it's human nature to take for granted and just sort of be a little more dismissive of anything that's routine after a while. You see people at their very first practice and they're like skipping through the parking lot to get to the practice space, and then you see all the veterans just dragging their bags behind them, like, you know, another day at the office. And I mean, I was always pretty like hyper and excited to be like, you know, keeping people up, but I don't know that there's like one magic secret to that besides just keeping your eye on the prize of greatness, because greatness is an ever-evolving idea. It doesn't end.
That sounds good. So that's what you would say to those veterans who are dragging their bags a little slower behind other people. And
Is that a symbol of greatness? I don't know. I don't know. I never saw Michael Jordan walking from the parking lot to his practice space. Is that how he walked? I don't know. What did he think about on his walk? I don't know. Like, I don't know what the answer is to that. But I do know that people who achieve great things do have a ridiculous, because I've studied greatness itself, the art of greatness, and they have an obsessive quality about them where they're constantly focused on what the goal is and what can I do today to get a little bit closer to that. And it's not something that really turns off. It's kind of always on. And it is something that can be taught, I believe. And so if it's something that, you know, you as a team captain or a coach or a leader are willing to study, you can sort of figure out what that means for you and how you would apply that to the people that you're leading. And hopefully some of that rubs off on them and they're excited to share their progress with each other. Message boards are great for that. Team meetings where, you know, a lot of time people will put pressure on team bonding. Like, oh, we're having a bonding dinner. Like, oh, is that on the schedule? Bonding? Like, are we just going to force that?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just sort of a scatter of energies. It's just people drinking at a bar or something. And that's not bad and it's not wrong. But if at least 15 minutes of that was focused on an actual meeting where people talk about what their goals are individually and the goals of the team, and that's constantly being reiterated that we do have goals and that we are striving for personal greatness and team greatness. At least 15 minutes of any get-together, I feel, should be focused on that. And then scatter and do whatever it is that people do when they're bonding on schedule. Great, but at I really feel like focus is sort of a thing that has to be consistent to inspire.